Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's edition of DeSimone on Deals, the Exit Strategy Podcast. This is a podcast to help business owners plan and get ready to transition out of their business, whether it's to the next generation, to their management team, or in a third-party sale, which I prefer as I get paid success fees in that. But this is not about me promoting my business. This is about helping business owners be ready. And this each month we bring in new guests to help frame this conversation and people that can hopefully be a resource for the listeners of this podcast. This month we have a great guest. He's a snazzy dresser, pretty good golfer, long-term friend of mine. We've met through an organization called Focal Point Coaching. We're both master coaches and part of a group called Value and Transition Advisors, helping people prepare for that sale. Uh, Currently, he is the founder and managing director of the Vision Forward Business Solutions, which helps businesses achieve this success. They put in the succession plans. They help teams grow. They help teams interact generationally and perform better. And more importantly, some of you may recognize him if you see my page because I share this a lot. He's the co-host of the Blue Collar BS podcast, which is pretty popular with our friend Stephen Doyle. So please welcome Brad Herda. If I missed anything, Brad, fill in the blanks.
It's all good, Greg. It is good to be here, and thank you for having me on. As much as you enjoy the transaction side of it, I love the family transition and or management team transition side of things to keep that stable versus the third party sale. I just find that more challenging and more fun. Um, but that's to each their own, and not every because as you know, not every business is going to transact out in the open market, and that might be the only way that it can be the parents or the leaders can get their money out is through some sort of management buyout or family transition.
I agree. I think most people don't set out to think about selling their business. Um, but they do think about how to get out of the business.
Correct.
Sometimes you have to nudge them along to think about that. Kind of talk about how you get involved with your clients um, to start this process, whether it's a generational transfer or a management transfer.
Yeah. Surprisingly, it usually starts with the generation that's coming inbound, not the generation coming outbound, because they're looking for support on um, making all the change without having all of the anxiety and stress and family dynamics. So there's kind of coming in as that potential moderator and or third party to say, hey, it's okay. Um, and work through that change as opportunity to work to transfer the operational piece of the business to the second generation and third generation while still allowing the ownership to be the ownership. Because transferring the ownership and running the business are two different things. And too often, mid-sized privately held businesses, they make that all one big gooey mess of, well, I own the business, so I must have to run the business. No, no, not true at all. And,
Kind of
and
explain how you help businesses think through that distinction between being the owner and being the operator.
so it really starts with trying to help them understand that from a right, if you're a publicly traded company, you have your board, you have your ownership group, right? Up here, all the stockholders, then I have my board of directors, then I have all the people that are running the things and try to get them to understand that their family business, their privately held business is no different. Um, it's just that you've been participating in all three levels the entire time, and now you're only going to be participating in one or two of those levels as the owner, as the senior leader, because I don't want to do the work. I want to travel. I want to go do whatever, which means you're going to have to remove yourself operationally, and we got to set those boundaries as to what that looks like. And that's usually where the struggle comes in, is those operational boundaries at first, right?
So, what are some of the typical boundaries that they struggle with, and what are some of the ways that you help them overcome that?
One of them, one for sure, is expenses, right? I've had clients that were mom and dad want to see every dollar spent, right? We're doing, 8, $10 million a year in revenue, and I want to see every $500 check that goes out the door. Why are we holding this all up, right? Oh, I need to buy a new piece of equipment, right? Need to buy batteries for some guns or some cordless equipment. That's $500. You're really going to want to see that I'm buying back. Like, come on, let's. So
Mhm.
we set up the thresholds and try to figure out where that data and some KPIs and things that would be available for the parents if they can only get 5 kilobytes of data on a phone on a remote island because that's all they could get. What are the things that are important to them? And really get the parents or the senior leaders to understand what's really important. And it might be cash in the bank, might be an ARAP ratio, might be daily picks, could be whatever that is that's important to them. And keep the things that are important that may seem stupid to the kids, but let that stay so that we can have peace across the entity. Um, get them out of HR, get them out of, they've been working with George for 38 years, and George goes around the kid to go talk to dad about the thing. Dad needs to say, George, you need to go talk to my kid about that, not get involved in all the nitty gritty. So we got to work on some of that behavioral changes as well. So that way we can transfer the authority of the operation.
You mentioned KPIs, and you could have 1,000 KPIs. You could have a dashboard of two or three. I imagine that's probably some of the struggle is letting go of what you need to look at to make sure that you still understand that the business is functioning well, but not overwhelming and or being overbearing to the people that are actually running the business. How do you go through that process of determining what are the key KPIs to actually monitor to stay in touch but not be overbearing?
Again, it's a matter of what's important to, right? Because so I had one client, he only cared about four things. He cared about, it was a transition, been in a partnership, family business forever and a day. Son-in-law is taking over. He only cared about cash in the bank. He cared about the weekly AR AP ratio so he could understand what was coming in and what was coming out. He wanted to see uh, weekly sales numbers as to what was revenue generating. And then he wanted to see how many orders were picked each week. Those are the four things that mattered to him. That was it. Um, Ultimately, and this was pre-COVID and during COVID, that actually, uh, the cash in the bank piece and having a minimum number that he wanted to have was really important. We're working pre-COVID and saying, okay, this is probably, we want to think about this a little differently, do some things, maybe do some treasury management activities, talk to your bank because you got a lot of cash sitting here doing nothing. Turned out that he was right. he,
Yeah.
that was his old school mentality, right? I want to conserve. He grew up in that era of cash is important, and it was, um, and it served him very well during COVID.
So you're touching on something I kind of made a note of to talk to you about just because of your podcast and knowing you. You said they came up in that era that was important to them. So you deal with a lot of generational issues and conflicts based on perspective of how they people look at the business and look at what's important.
Mhm.
So how do you deal with the different generations from boomers to Gen X to millennials to Zs? How does that work within your practice?
Uh, my goal is always to make sure Thanksgiving, Christmas, birthdays, funerals, weddings, that it's all a good, right? All those engagements are going to be good, that it's not going to be animosity. Um, and leverage the fact that this phone right here that the boomer might actually use to pay attention for in their personal life, that it's okay to use at work. Right? It's not always a distraction. It's not always noise. So that maybe if their grandkids are involved or nieces and nephews are involved in the business and they see them on their phone, they're not just making TikTok videos. They might be looking up, how do I fix this machine? How do I find this bit of data? Who should I call to do a hotshot delivery because somebody wasn't available or the system wasn't, or it's two-person dependent and the data is not available for them to go find that information within the organization. So they have to find it outside the organization. Um, so we work on that aspect of it from a technology and a behavioral perspective. And at the end of the day, we're all individuals, but trying to get them to understand that just because dad was there at 6 o'clock every morning and didn't leave till 6 o'clock every night, again, you're the owner of the business. No one's going to care as much as you, and your kids aren't going to care as much as you. And somehow we need to let go that it's okay to be there from 8 to 3, or it's okay to come in at 10 o'clock once a week. as a leader because I've got these other personal commitments along the way to understand that work life balance and the mental health issues that are prevalent in today's workforce. It's important to leverage that to understand it so you can make your business better, not just coddle it and say, oh, these snowflakes don't know how to work. They don't want to do this. They don't want to do that. All you're going to do is create animosity and anxiety in your organization. And it's a bad idea. And you got to figure out how to adapt to it.
So I've noticed a difference when I'm bringing different businesses to sale, whether I'm dealing with a boomer as the owner or an Gen X as the owner. Kind of, can we talk about when you're starting a process with an organization and you have a boomer that is the head of the company,
Mhm.
and you have the next generation, say they're X or millennials, how do you, how do they, what is it different perspectives and what are the different things you have to focus on when you're dealing with the boomer that wants to exit versus the X and the millennials that want to step up? What are the different approaches you have to take?
Understanding what growth is or is not, right? Because they're the folks that are exiting are at that point in their life. It's right. It's the risk tolerance that we all have in our lives and our investment. As we get closer to the end, typically we have less risk. If we're in the middle of things or we're coming up on prime opportunities, we're going to have more risk tolerance along the way. And managing those risk tolerance bands of growth or change or automation or technology and getting to a consensus of what makes sense for the business, talk about ROIs. Many don't talk about a return on investment for these things. They've just spent cash and done the thing and been very, knock on wood, lucky or faithful to be able to get the return on those things over time through intuition and no data. And what I like to try to turn things into is, what does the data tell us? Even though your intuition was right, mom and dad's intuition or uncle's intuition or grandfather was correct, what's the data telling us we should move forward in and go forward with something? If buying a brake press versus buying a new laser for a capital expense on their fabrication floor, if those are the two options, well, which one's going to get us the most bang for the buck with what's going on? So we'll talk through, where do you see your quoting opportunities? What are you currently outsourcing? Who can run the machine moving forward? Where does that, what, shipping costs, different things, and kind of look at that all together from a data perspective. Whereas the grandfather is, oh, we just need that press brake because we need to do more things. And it turns out you might only use it 20% of the time. However, that 20% of the time might have saved you tens of thousands of dollars in shipping costs of shipping, you know, product that's been formed, high costs, low density freight might have been the best idea, but we got to go through the data to find it out, not just take somebody's word for it. And that's usually where the struggle comes in because we're talking about feelings versus data, and we got to convert those feelings into data.
So how do you, because I worked with a client and he was very intuitive. Like he didn't have, his numbers were always on point and on target, but he couldn't explain to you what was in the
Mhm.
P&L. But he knew what his margins were going to be. He knew that if he had too much labor, he knew that if the wait times were at a certain point, that he needed more. If there was not enough wait, he had too much. So he could intuitively see that, and he was making calculations. But when he
Correct.
tried to bring it down to the kids, it was hard to translate like how he thought through it to trigger decision making. How do you take that intuition out of someone's head and turn it into a process that can be transitioned to the next generation or the next set of management so they can see the same things that you see?
Try to go through and just use some tools and techniques that I learned from my corporate career, whether it's going to be some value stream mapping or some mind mapping or
I've heard those terms. What is a value stream map?
so a value stream map will be, kind of there's a couple different ways to do it. You can do it as a flow chart, you could do it as swim lanes, just kind of identifying where all the decisions are made and what the inputs and outputs are. And ultimately, I like to try to break it down into the inputs and outputs because that's how we all work. I mean, your business value is all based on inputs and outputs and what people are willing to do, no different than any of your internal processes. For me to get on the show, I needed the input from you of I need the the questions, I need the opportunity, I need the Zoom link to come in and do this. So I need those inputs.
At least I gave you the Zoom link.
You did, uh, which is good. So now you can get the output of the conversation and those types of things along the way. But without the Zoom link, without the conversation, without me getting those inputs and you explaining what you're looking for on the show, we're not going to get the right output. So if that's going through the intuition is all that going through somebody's head, we have to break that down into a process. And one of the things that I find with many of my clients is they think everything they do is unique.
Yep.
Every shop, every business owner, well, our business is unique. It is, but it's not. You're not the only one that bends steel. You're not the only one that, welds things. You're not the only one that paints things. You're not the only lawyer firm in town. You're not any of those things.
Yeah.
Um, what might be unique is their process. And what happens is what I try to do is get everything broken down into a process. Here's all the steps we're going to follow, but the answer to the question creates the scope of work, which then creates the situations or the answers or the different things, right? Um, there's a process to go to market, right? For your clients, I'm going to go
Hmm.
to market. But the complexity of the question that they provide you the response with is going to indicate whether that's going to be simple or more complicated or slam dunk. Most businesses don't even think about their organization from a process viewpoint. They think about it just kind of comes in and every job, this customer is unique and this customer is unique and this customer is unique. No, they place an order, you make some shit, you ship it.
Hmm. I was finding it funny. I had a partner of mine who's semi-retired now, and we used to get that all the time when you're going to sell a business. Like, you have to understand we're very different than everyone else. You have to understand our model. And he says, "Well, are you trying to sell a product?" I said, "Yes." So you're trying to sell that product for more than it costs to buy it and make it? Yes. You trying to make sure that that difference is more than the cost of your overhead and that you have money left over to pay yourself? Yes. I'm like, I think I got the model. I think that people understand like that's the model. Um, and every everyone's trying to do the same thing. It's just figuring out how to do it the most efficient way. And I think meet the market's niche. It's like, what are the things that the market's looking for that you can solve? And it may be just a subtle take on it, but it's still the same problem. You're solving someone has a problem, you're solving it.
Right. I do a lot of work in the construction industry and one of the home builders. They have a very robust pre-construction process. And it is unique to them, and that process is unique, and it provides the customer a sense of mind, and they know what they're buying, and they know what they can expect once the house is built to provide a very positive build cycle and construction cycle. But that's not what everybody does at the end of the. But they're trying to say, "Oh, this is so unique." I'm like, no, I got a foundation, I got a floor plan, I got walls, I got things, I got to put drywall in and do whatever those things are. The decisions the customer makes is what makes the house unique.
Hmm.
You're just building the house. There's not a lot of different ways to build a house in many cases. There's a lot of different materials and opportunities, but the way it gets built is pretty much the same no matter where you are in the country.
Hmm. I want to take a little bit of a step back. I know that you work with clients a lot of different phases. You do a lot of exit planning and strategy and succession planning. But I know that's not the way you don't lead with that. It's just something that you're able to help with. So when you get brought on with a client, what are the typical times or triggers that come up with the business owner that says, I got to start thinking about getting this to my kids, or who's going to take this over, and how am I going to transition into that party, that whether it's family or management. What are the triggers that because I know you don't lead with that, but it comes up with you all the time because you and I talk about it all the time. What are the triggers that start that conversation with you and your clients?
It starts usually with me asking them, you know, you're running this business, you're owning this business. What are you planning on doing with it? Right? How are you planning on getting out? And I've got one client right now, it's a 10-year plan, and we're going to transition it to an internal candidate, and we're going to allow the business to fund the transaction so that way the employee that will be taking it over doesn't have to sign a big note and get his wife all upset and put all this personal guarantees on all these things. There'll be some, but it won't be like the significant value of what the business is really worth, because we're going to leverage the business to pay the current owner. And those are some of the things that most don't even think about. They're thinking, well, Johnny's got to give me $6 million so I can get my money out so I can go retire to the Bahamas. Well, if you think about this soon enough, why don't you just let the business pay you? Use your gifting approach, save some taxes along the way, and everybody's happy.
How do you
I'm
get?
not the one doing all of that work, but I'm the one
Yeah.
having the conversation to go say, hey, you should talk to somebody about doing these types of things to make sure it's right for you. I don't know all the things that are going on. I don't know how your trusts are set up. I don't know what you have set up for your family. It's, the heirs and things like that. But there's some opportunity here that you might not be thinking about, because too often the advisors that mom and dad had were there, or they're in the same risk profile as mom and dad because they've had them since they were all growing up together,
Yeah.
and they're not even thinking about all those things because they're just going along in the same path and they're just muddling along, and those service providers aren't maybe doing them the best service that they're paying for. The accounting firm, the financial advisor, they might just be collecting their check and their fees and not really
Hmm.
doing the family a service. um, and that's usually what I find in many family businesses, is those service providers have done them a complete disservice in not asking those questions early enough to allow for opportunity to do things differently.
You, what you talked about is that letting the business pay for the transaction. I've seen this and I know it works really well, but I've also seen the older generation or the ownership generation, particularly if they're boomers, and I may be stereotypical, saying, "Well, why should I do that? Why should I had to scratch and I had to bootstrap and I had to do all this stuff to acquire it? They should do the same thing." How do you get? And then that obviously that puts a lot of risk and basically may take some people that could take over out of the mix because they can't handle that risk.
Correct.
How do you handle that conversation saying, "Hey, yes, we are going to use the asset that you built to help someone else acquire this from you, and it's going to be better for you versus them coming up with their own money and making a an isolated transaction to get you out." How do you deal with that kind of mentality and mindset?
um Kind of just going through how everything is shaping up economically in today's world, right? Just the cost of education, the cost of everything, to go, okay, you want to do this. You've identified that you want, this is the individual or the groups of individuals that you want to run your business from your legacy perspective. The only way, not the only, but the most economical way potentially, is to leverage the assets to your advantage for them, versus, because at the end of the day, you're still going to get your cash out. Whether you get it as a promissory note from the bank at a closing deal, or we do it through a series of events over 3 to 5 years or whatever it looks like, does it really matter? And kind of work through that emotional journey with them to rationalize where they're coming from that perspective. And if at the end of the day they're hard set on, no, I want the lump sum and I want to make this happen, I said, okay, then most likely you're probably going to need to go to a PE firm to get those dollars, and most likely those folks that you've hired aren't going to be here when you leave. If that's important to you or not,
Mhm.
great. If it is, then you probably should make a different decision. If it's not important to you, you just want the lump sum at the end when you're ready, cool. Then damn the torpedoes, and whatever happens to everybody else, so be it.
You mentioned a couple things about the professionals, and I've come across really good CPAs, attorneys, and financial advisors, and I've come across some that, to you say, use phrase, are doing their client a disservice. How do you identify with your clients, like, hey, I think this is what you need from these professionals, and this is what you're getting? How do you identify, like, with if they have the right team, and how do you interject a potential new option when they have a period of trust going on for a period of time?
It's asking some questions, asking current things that might be going on. So we'll use the life insurance funding aspect of things, right? So that change in, was it 2009 or 2010 when they made the change of, after it got through court, that, if a life insurance policy is funded by the company, that revenue is now seen as taxable revenue into the organization, even though the beneficiary is still the owners. If their accounting firm or their legal firm hasn't talked to them about those things and they are completely clueless on that, then they're not doing them a service, because it has massive implications if of family and other things. Now, they may have all their stuff set up that they thought it was no big deal, but if they don't even know that that's an option or that's out there, that's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
If um taxation across multiple states, paying state income taxes for the Wayfair ruling that came out right around pre-COVID or just right around COVID era.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if they're not paying taxes across states or being able to have that and their CPA doesn't care or not even thinking about that, that's a problem. Right? We all take some of those things for granted,
Mm-hmm.
but until you ask the question, you don't know those things. And you go, "Oh, hey, how are you collecting your taxes? I mean, this component, you're doing a lot going into Louisiana. Are you paying state taxes in Louisiana? Huh. I don't know. Maybe I should ask." Okay, great. So just asking some of those things that I learned through my networks and through talking with professionals like yourself and other things that have been risks for others when it gets to the closing table, when people are doing due diligence, to be able to say, "Hey, you probably want to have a conversation on that."
Do you, how important is it for your business owner, your clients, to have conversations to put realistic targets of what it means to have enough to retire? Because I've seen it where they don't ever think they have enough savings, so they work forever because they never think they never think they're going to outlive their savings, or they think they're going to outlive their savings, so they keep working even until they're 85. Then other people have opportunities to transition, but because they've an inflated value of what their business is worth versus what they actually need, they kind of get stuck because there's a gap on those perceptions. How important is it for them to get grounded, and how do you help them get grounded? I'm leading you to the answer.
Yeah, I know. For it's find the
Say
right
what I want you to say.
it's find the right people to have that conversation to know what good enough is. Because as we talked about earlier, of mom and dad transitioning out of operational aspect of the business, um, their pay structure has to be different. And too often the conversation of mom and dad to the kids who are running the business, they're not willing to give the kids a number that says, "Hey, I need X number of dollars a year out of the from this somehow. I need $400,000 a year from this business to live the life that I want to live and maintain and da 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 da." Okay, cool. And today much of it's coming out of W2 income, and they're not doing the work, which now means that their cost of goods sold and things are way overinflated because, or their operating expenses are way overinflated because they're paying wages for no work. Like, no, we got to redo all those things, and you need to do better tax planning, and you got to start thinking about all that, so that way you know what good is and what good isn't. And so usually it starts with that conversation as to
Mhm.
how what they need, that triggers the opportunity to say, "Okay, what do I need over the next 15, 20, 25, 30 years along the way?" Um, and unfortunately, for what I've seen, many of the blue collar owners that I have seen, they had very poor advisors and they are tied up in non liquid assets
Mhm.
that aren't going to allow them to retire very comfortably until they get rid of those assets. And now they're going to take um, massive hits for appreciation of value, because
Mhm.
usually it's a lot of real estate, and
Mhm.
you can't 1031 exchange all of that all the time. And
Mhm.
now they're sitting in a tax nightmare.
You touched on something that I've come across a lot is you mentioned they're going to pay through W-2s or other kind of benefits throughout the business. Um, ho- but it's not really the true cost of running the business. Like if they went to became absentee owners and had to replace themselves, the cost structure is way different than if they're paying themselves. How do you work with your owners to understand the difference between what the operational compensation is for what they're doing and what their family's doing versus the incremental family benefit that you get extra compensation because you're related to the owner or your name's on the front door? How do you deal with that?
Each one's unique as to where they're coming from. So the answer is, as always, it depends. But in general, it's helping trying to position the operational leader, the son or daughter, to understand that, look, if you're paying mom and dad $130,000 a year in W-2 plus state income taxes and FICA and all that other stuff, that's dollars that you're not spending on payroll elsewhere to do the work that mom and dad are supposed to be doing, or that to find you a executive assistant so you can do the work that you're supposed to be doing, because I'm doing the work of mom and dad, I'm doing the work of my own job, I'm doing the work of two or three other people. Hey, that hundred and some odd $1,000 could be spent differently. So we need to figure that out. And and that's where I tend to go and say, okay, operational, let's figure out what you need to do from a structure perspective, and then backfill it. Because at the end, the dollars should be coming out of the net income aspect of it for them to pull out from a distribution perspective,
Mhm.
not go in and put in 6, 7, 8, 10 people that you can't afford. But what does the affordability structure really show, and how does this play out financially? Because most of them have more than one entity as well, which makes it even more fun and complex. And we got
Mhm.
one that's taking the loss, one that's taking the win, and how do we plan that all out? And it's like, oh, now we got to get into: are you paying each company correctly? Are you offsetting dollars and costs across each organization? Most aren't, but you might need to start doing that and making your accounting a little bit more complex in order to get to where you want to go.
How do you deal with that when they have multiple entities and it's kind of a tax shell game to for them understanding what is the real economic benefit of the overall organization and to focus on that and make decisions based on what they're really getting versus letting the tax tail wag the dog.
So I like to ask, one of the first questions I ask my clients or prospects, I ask them the question, what is more important to you? Is it more important to you to pay the least amount possible in taxes, or is it more important to you to accumulate wealth? And that answer will dictate what end of the spectrum they're on, because they're on opposite ends of the teeter totter. And most, they're like, well, I don't want to, no, I don't want to pay taxes at all. Okay, good. If I don't want to pay taxes, that means you're going to show no income, which then means you have no wealth. You might live a great lifestyle. You might have
Hmm.
lots of things and lots of shit and lots of opportunities, and you might travel a lot and do all the things, but you haven't really accumulated any wealth for later on. So
Hmm.
you might want to start rethinking what that looks like.
And I see that a lot where people they just cannot get their arms around that they may have to show income to have value, to have wealth. How do you work with your clients to transition that mindset, even if it's just a little bit, to get them help them start getting the wealth mindset versus the lowest tax paid mindset?
I'll tend to probably show like I'll take one of our industry reports that we have available to us, kind of go through those and show how the P&L and the balance sheet kind of break down over the industry. I might do some calculation reports with them to understand, hey, if we showed this type of net income versus this, and yes, it might cost you a little bit in taxes, but your multiple should be this. Okay, if I pay $30,000 a year more in taxes over the next 3 years, but my multiple goes from 2.3 to 4.8 on a net income number, what are we talking about here? Why are we just so try to show them the math and the logic behind it? There's
Hmm.
a little bit of voodoo in it, right? There's a little bit of art, a little bit of science,
Hmm.
um, and help them try to create that connection. But it sometimes it's just in their core being that taxes are bad, and we're going to do everything we can to avoid it. And we're going to buy every truck every year because we can accelerate depreciation and make ourselves cash poor but asset rich. And it's like, well, this is stupid.
Yeah, I always struggle with that where the CPA would call like, hey, you're making $500,000. You should buy two trucks. I'm like, will you? I always ask the client, did you need two trucks and you're just waiting? Or is this just a tax shelter? I mean, if you actually need the trucks, yeah, then you should buy the trucks. And if you can get the tax benefit, great. But if you're doing that, if the sole purpose is to reduce taxes, not to benefit the company and accumulate wealth or accumulate value or operational efficiency, then it doesn't make any sense.
Correct.
I've also pointed, and I think you and I have talked about this, where I've had people say, well, they found ways to reduce their tax. And let me just be clear with for everyone listening to me. I'm not the IRS. I don't want you to pay any more taxes than you have to. I want you to pay the lowest possible amount legally allowable. Um,
Taxes are a privilege of success.
yes, you only pay taxes if you're successful. People who are unsuccessful typically don't pay taxes, no matter what they say about all the 1% and the billionaires. Every successful person I know pays taxes. Um, but I've seen people say, "Well, I saved $100,000 in income, saved $100,000 in income, which meant I paid 30,000 less in taxes." And to your argument earlier, you were saying, okay, you went from a 2.3 multiple to a 4.8. I'm like, okay, you saved 30,000 in taxes, but and how long have you done that for? If you lost if you lost, let's just make it five so I can do my math in my head. You get to a five multiple, that's $150,000 of value you lost by saving 30,000 tax because you can't show 100,000 of income because you saved it. So you have to make that savings for 5 years in a row just to break even. I said, so it's that's the mindset I try to see help my clients see is that the multiplier effect of your multiples on valuation times the savings has to be well worth it to even start considering that.
Right. And just from a bankable perspective and your
Mm,
line of credit and for other activities, if you're a mid-sized market organization and you're doing 20, $50 million a year in revenue, but you're trying to show almost zero income and you're in a volatile industry that banks, right, it's like the wind at what they're going to finance and not finance at times, and what is collateralized and what is not collateralized. They change the rules continually. So if you have a strong financial position and you can show the revenue and you can show what's going on there and show that that's happening, your banks become a friend, not, a leech in your pocket. Oh, they want to charge me too much money for all. Well, yeah, because you did some really stupid things over here on your financials that aren't putting you in a good light to the bank.
mhm,
So you did this to yourself, not, oh, but it's my tax advisor. And this comes back into who are the service providers for them to have those conversations. If you're going to go through a massive capital expansion to put on, either move or put on an addition to the building, you better start planning for that 2 years ahead of time.
mhm.
So that way you're going when you go to the bank, you're sitting in a good spot and you can show and tell the story, right? Some of the things we talk about is, can you tell the story? Because if everything's a one time only, you have a problem. If everything's one
Yeah.
time only, well, this only happened this one time, but this also happened one time. Then you're in a financial mess when somebody's trying to rationalize, do I want to give you money or not?
Yeah, I always find when you have to talk, whether you're talking to a bank or if it's to get a loan or you're talking to someone who's trying to acquire your company, and there's a lot of different questions come up, and they always come up, whether you're running the business clean or not. Questions come up because people want to understand what they're investing in or what they're going to underwrite for a loan. And if every time you have a question, you say, "Well, you got to understand this one." Oh, interesting story. That one, let me tell you about that. That's different. And everything is a different story, and everything has a story. It's very difficult to get your arms get anyone to willing to write a check to hire a company or a bank to underwrite it. We have a guest out in the back here protecting the perimeter. There's clearly a rabbit or a chipmunk or a squirrel that's got too close to the porch, so I
So
apologize.
the dogs are having a good day.
Well, no, there's one dog just sitting there just staring at them. The other one is protecting me.
Perfect. Well, you never know when those rabbits and squirrels might take over the world.
Exactly. Um, so it looks like she may be wrapping up our conversation quicker than I want. Um, So before we end, can we I like to talk about like success stories and what we could do to improve. I know you've had a few success stories, and rather than end on things that go wrong, why don't we end this with you on a success story that you had where helping someone through this transition. I know for you it's not always like a quick fix. It's you work with companies for a long time, but how would you give us a nice little success story?
So I have a specialty construction client who acquired the business from his father-in-law. Um, and one of the questions he asked me is, why am I going through all of this pain and suffering of doing all the things that should have been done, decades ago? And that comes back into his service, right? Who his father-in-law had for service providers, um, who was watching over, and just the mentality of how they run the business differently. Um, and he's grown the business now; it's doubled in revenue. We're working on the succession plan for that 10-year plan for him to move that to the next person that's in line, working on adding some additional revenue lanes, working on there was an acquisition in play that fell through because the broker on the other side was a dick, and right, I don't think it's going to close. I fully expect that in early 26 we're going to come back and go, hey, would you like to buy this again, because we couldn't get to the closing table. It was just some stupid things that the other sellers weren't prepared, didn't it was just bad. But we're looking through some other acquisitions and some other ways to go out about that. Worked on him as a leader, worked on him on building out his team, letting go of things, finding his role as I am the leader of the organization, I'm not the doer. Working on that transition exit support. He's got a couple other folks that have been referral partners and network partners of mine inside the organization. So that way it's not all coming from one perspective. So it's clean, healthy leadership and growth dynamics across multiple providers. And it's been an amazing opportunity. And he's just killing it. He's taken the approach of doing the work, investing in himself, investing in his team, coach them in or coach them out. He spent a ton of money on his staff members to um, hey, is it the right person in the right seat? Get through some of the trauma that happened with some, his father-in-law was a very different leader. Have good employees that are now understand the mission, vision, values, and what the purpose is, and they're all clean, clear, and know what winning looks like every day, and that is just massively important.
I know I think you and I've talked about that client in the past, and there's a lot of different things you had to do over time. But was there an aha moment for that owner where he says, "Okay, I have to start doing things differently." He's bought into the process that you worked with him on.
When he realized he was at the top and that he needed that everybody was looking to him for direction. When he realized that he's no longer just the guy working for his father-in-law. He is the guy that owns this place, and that it's okay. Um, One of the key moments was when they were in a pretty good cash position. He made a decision to take some distributions to remove um, some debt from their family life along the way, and kind of just free up his mind of his right that emotion of why we work to provide, for our house, for our this, for our that. And it wasn't that they weren't living outside their means or anything like that. It was just a matter of that freedom of the burden of the why, and the money was there. And he said, should I talked to his financial advisor, talked to his accountant, talked to everybody they needed. Like, seems like a great plan. And the minute that he decided to do that was the moment that he started changing his behavior of, okay, now I have the freedom of I don't want to say financial freedom because that's not it. It's more of the emotional freedom to run the business and know that it's all going to be okay.
I think that's pretty cool. I think it's a pretty good piece of advice for a lot of people is I've talked about there's two types of FU money that's having so much money in the bank and investments that you can do whatever you want. The other part is not being beholden to a bank or debt so that when you make decisions, it's not because you're tied to this previous decisions that you made and these ongoing payments. When you can just make decisions because you think it's the right thing to do and it's something that you think will add value over time, and it's because you're not burdened by all these other commitments. I think that that's a huge relief for people, and I think it opens up their mind to a lot more possibilities on planning for a successful transition.
Yeah, and just his own freedom and like I said, the work that he's done on himself and what he's done, and I can't be more proud of what he's accomplished and been grateful to go along in that journey.
Okay. Well, Brad, we're coming up against the end, and I got to make sure that the perimeter's safe and no rabbits and chipmunks and squirrels have breached the perimeter. We'll see what happened. If people want to get a hold of you and have you discuss with you how to get their business more prepared for a successful transition to the next generation or to the management team, how would they get a hold of you?
The easiest way is the easiest way is my phone number 414-852-4224. Just leave me a message and I'll get back to you.
Cool.
Um,
We'll make sure that's on
otherwise,
the at the end.
LinkedIn at is usually a good place to find me as well. I'm out there all the time with different posts, different things with the podcast. Otherwise, the email is bherda, HERDA, at focalpointcoaching.com, which is what we are both part of.
Hmm.
Website is vfbsolutions.com. If you're interested in that, we're going to go through a rebrand there shortly. Got some new photos coming, some new imagery. It's expensive to get pictures done. It's really amazing, but
Yes.
they're cool. So we're in the process of getting new imagery taken care of and those type of things. And then, as always, the Blue Collar BS podcast. We've got a website for that. We've got find it wherever you listen to your podcasts. Comment, like, share. Get a hold of us through that network also. Um, and just kind of go through there. I'm not difficult to find if you're looking for me. Let's put it that way.
Well, and guys, I recommend you follow the Blue Collar BS podcast. It's pretty cool. It's interesting. It's very funny and entertaining and informative. A lot of good stuff that they talk about, but it's not a boring podcast. It's fun to listen to. Brad, thanks for being a guest. I look forward to future conversations. Probably won't be on the podcast, but I know we'll be talking. Uh,
Something one and done, Greg. Is that what you're trying to
no,
say?
you're not one and done, but you know.
This is so bad that you're kicking me out. Is that's what I'm
No,
hearing?
no, Brad, I've had way worse. Um, I've had better, but
You're not wrong.
no, this is great. I always appreciate your insight. I always appreciate our conversations, and I'm glad we could share it with the rest of the people that listen to this podcast. So
All right.
I'll be signing off now. Thanks again, Brad, and I'll see everyone next month when we do our next podcast.
All right. Thanks, Greg.